Alien was released in 1979 and is directed by Ridley Scott and stars the likes of Sigourney Weaver, John Hurt, Ian Holm, Tom Skerritt, just to name a few. The movie follows the crew of the commercial ship Nostromo as they're in hypersleep heading back to Earth, but their sleep is suddenly interrupted as the ship picks up a distress signal on an unknown planet nearby. Obviously, they have to go and check it out, and thus the movie Alien ensues, and it's fucking amazing. Now, I watched Alien for the very first time several years ago, and unfortunately at the time, I only liked it, and I didn't really love it as much as everyone else did, because back then, I only watched movies simply to be entertained by them, and I did not have the respect for filmmaking as an art form as I do now. And I'm so glad I rewatched Alien before doing this review, because watching it from a different perspective, from a critical standpoint, this movie is honestly amazing, and it's honestly one of the best sci-fi movies and or horror movies ever made. The first thing I must say is that seeing this movie came out in 1979, it's held up remarkably well. I mean, it looks almost brand new, bar a couple of things that make it look tiny bit dated. And I think the reason it holds up so well to this day is due to several factors coming into play at the same time. The first thing I must mention is Ridley Scott's direction. I mean, it's perfect. When I watched it for the first time, I think the thing I hated about it the most was its slow pace. I thought it was a bit too boring. But watching it now, I think the pacing is perfect, and it kind of needs that slow pace as it builds up the suspense almost perfectly. Alien is simply one of those movies where the tension just builds and builds and builds over the course of the movie, and you know it's going to all go at some point. You're just not entirely sure when or how it's going to go down. And personally, I think this suspenseful approach is handled really well by two main things. You have a very slow pace for the majority of the movie, which is intersected by some very intense and almost gruesome scenes. For example, the movie has a pretty slow and steady pace, but then it's immediately interrupted by the iconic chestburster scene, which is pretty horrific to watch, especially for first-time viewing if you've never seen the movie before. And I think it's this pattern of slow pace and intense scene that makes it incredibly rewatchable and incredibly suspenseful. The other element that I think adds to the suspense of the movie is the fact that they do not show the alien that much in the movie. I mean, the design of the alien is honestly one of my favourites ever to be put to a movie. I mean, the movie came out in 79, but the creature itself still looks new and cool, but yet terrifying at the same time. I mean, if I saw that thing in person, I would shit a brick. Honest to God, that alien is one of the most scariest things I've ever seen, but yet the design is so simple. And this leads on to another point of why I think this movie just aged really well, and that is the mixture of the score and the set design for both the alien ship and the ship Nostromo. The inside of the Nostromo looks like an actual thing you could go on. It looks like a ship that's been well lived in by these crew members, and you feel like you could easily walk onto it at any point and reach out and grab it. That being said, the design of the crashed alien ship is quite the opposite. It looks very organic, and the inside of the ship almost has a look to it as if it's like a rib cage or a spine. It looks like it's alive, but you know it's a ship, and the way H.R. Giger created these almost perverse images, but makes them also creepy at the same time, is honestly... it's kind of beautiful to look at, but yet again, that being said, it's still incredibly unnerving to see all this bone-like imagery and phallic imagery, if you will, just scattered throughout this alien spaceship. It makes it look more alien than, say, the Nostromo, which is pretty basic in comparison. Now, as most of you know, Alien paved the way for many movies afterwards that would eventually copy the same formula, where you have a group of people trapped on a spaceship, there's something on board, but they have to try and survive. Now, the reason I think Alien does it so well compared to many that have copied and failed afterwards is the dynamic between the crew members. They actually feel like people you could have a conversation with, and they feel like real human beings. So when one of them dies, you're scared shitless like the rest of the crew members, and you feel like you're in that same situation with them. You want them to survive, and you honestly don't know who's going to go next. And the reason why I think this whole team dynamic of the crew members works really well here is not just the really good dialogue, but also the fact that there is not a clear main protagonist until halfway through the movie. Throughout the majority of the runtime, you're just following this crew trying to survive. It's only until halfway through the movie that Ripley steps up and becomes the main character. And all of what I just said is backed up by some really, really good performances. Tom Skerritt is really good. Sigourney Weaver, especially seeing that this is her first ever film role, knocks it out of the park. She's easily the best performance in the movie, but that being said, the only competition she has is Ian Holm as Ash, who honestly gives an amazing performance. And again, this is his first ever movie role. He'd done theatre before, but he hadn't done anything like this before, and he takes this role in his stride, and it honestly works really well. Also, got to mention John Hurt, rest in peace, but his performance, though short-lived, is really good for what it is. Also, whilst we're on the subject of the team dynamic between them and certain characters, what I'm about to say is a spoiler, so if you haven't seen Alien, do be warned. But the eventual revelation that Ash is a robot honestly took me by surprise the first time that I saw this movie. But, that being said, when you watch the movie again, you kind of notice things that are very subtle with Ash's character before the eventual reveal happens. For example, he'll be looking around, and I noticed this the first time I saw it and I thought it was kind of a bit off, but when they are in space and nothing's really happening, when they've accepted the distress signal, he's acting like a normal part of the crew. But as soon as that alien comes on board, his entire persona changes, and he's very uptight and secretive about things, and you can tell that something's not quite right about him, because he takes a while to actually respond to people's conversations and anything that is asked of him. For example, when the famous chestburster scene happens, it takes him a good couple of minutes before he actually reacts and tries to help them. That being said, he doesn't actually help them at all, he just tells them to back away. So you can tell there's something not quite right there happening when you watch it again, knowing that Ash is a robot. What can I say? Alien is a classic, and I barely have any problems with the movie. The only nitpicks I do have are just kind of blatantly obvious continuity errors that have shown up as the movie has aged. For example, there's one blatantly obvious one where Ash has been discovered as a robot, and his dead body is on the table next to his decapitated head. And in one shot, you can tell it is obviously a fake head, but in the very next shot, they cut to the same head, but it's obviously been changed for Ian Holmes. It's not quite that squeaky clean of a cut, and they could have put another shot in there, like fake head, then cut of Ripley reacting to something, and then a shot of Ian Holmes' real head replacing the fake one. Because having fake head cut Ian Holmes' head makes it look a bit more obvious, and it's just small little things like that, small little effects glitches and, you know, continuity errors that I've picked up on as I've watched it more and more. Apart from that though, this movie is a classic and it's amazing to watch, and I've got to give Alien a 10 out of 10. I mean, if I didn't, it would just be wrong. So guys, that was my review of Alien. I'll have reviews of Aliens and Prometheus coming very soon. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.